This is a presentation done at the Bedford Amateur Radio Club by N5HYP Tom about AMSAT, the Amateur Radio Satellite Network or group. And he goes through how to connect to a satellite, how to work on repeaters, or how to work simplex from your backyard. This is a really fun video. It's kind of long, so take a look. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for joining us today.
Shut up and sit down.
Hi, this is Tom. I'm in my backyard. I'm legitimately in my backyard. It ain't a fake background back there. It's real. We're going to talk about amateur radio and space today. I'm a member of AMSAT, the Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation. It's a nonprofit organization. It's only got one employee, and that's Martha, the secretary. And AMSAT North America, as well as AMSAT organizations all around the world, are involved with amateur radio and space, which has been since 1961, since the days of Oscar I. There's a lot more satellites floating around up there than you might think that actually have amateur radio capability. Some are just bleepsats, it means they just have data and such on them, but some are legitimate communication satellites. And we're going to talk about that. If you guys, I'll give it some plugs right now, and then I'll give you some plugs later on. Of course, the ARRL just released a book, which is fine, but I don't recommend it. In fact, if you follow its instructions for programming your radio for SO50, one of the satellites we're going to actually try to do some contacts through during this presentation, you won't do it because it's wrong. So forget that. What you want is to go to amsat.org to their store and buy this book, Getting Started with Amateur Satellites. There's a 2020 version. This is 2019. 2020 is not a print version. It's only a PDF, but it costs only $15. And it'll take you from dead nothing, knowing nothing about what amateur radio, what space communications is all about, nothing about satellites. And it'll take you all the way through, give you some really good background, and give you ways to, beyond that, how to improve your station, how to improve your technique, how to do more different types of modes and such like that. So this is a great book. It's only $15. It's available on PDF. Go get it. Of course, I encourage membership in AMSAT because there's a lot of nifty benefits from there. Again, no longer printed this year, but we have an every other month journal that comes out. That's a really good resource, a lot of neat articles and stuff like that. Also, another benefit for members is a free satellite frequency chart guide. And we're going to refer to that this morning here. You have to be a member to get it free. I don't think they even sell it officially. We would sell a hard copy at Hamfest if we had Hamfest. The whole idea is amateur radio has been in space for a long time. A lot of different options. There are FM repeater satellites. They are a little different than what we have terrestrially because they're crossband, meaning maybe 2 meters up and 70 centimeters down, or 70 centimeters up and 2 meters down, or even 1.2 gigahertz up and 2 meters down. But and back in the old days, there used to be some HF satellites out there, and there may be some pretty quick here. The Chinese are looking at, they have a frequency coordinated set of satellites doing 10 meters up and 15 meters down. So that's kind of cool. And that's coming up. The cool part is you can get involved with amateur radio in space even if you're a technician class license, because of course, everything except for that HF component, which might happen again. But since everything is VHF, UHF, and above, right now, it's very easy for anybody of any class to get involved. You kind of need to know what satellites are up there, and what satellites are currently active. And I'm going to give you two resources that you can write down right now, and I will send you a link to Jared later on. I forgot to do that. I got a Dropbox folder that has all sorts of resources in it, and I'll send you a link for that so that you could give it to anybody who's interested. You can have it. AMSAT.org is our website, and on it you'll find a banner of menus, and you'll at satellite info. There's a satellite or current status page, and that'll it's kind of a live real-time page that tells you what satellites are currently up there that have amateur radio that people are interested in, whether they've been heard, meaning they're on the air, or not heard, or whether it's data heard, and basically real-time add-ins by users. So you can tell that this past week the ISS FM crossband repeater is not active, but APRS from the ISS is. So the status page is a good way to go. AMSAT.org also has, under satellite info, a drop-down menu for communications satellites. And there you'll find a couple of frequency charts, one for FM satellites and one for linear transponder analog satellites. That's the best way to know what satellites are currently functional, because it'll tell you the functional ones, and it'll also tell you the ones that are maybe for future launches. But and as those get populated, or as the launches actually happen, those satellites will show up as active. And of course, if you're a member, the frequency chart's pretty good too, because it's a nice thing to take on the road with you. So you need to know what's up there, and then you need to know what frequencies to listen to, and then you need to know when it's there. So there's a lot of cool options for that. Of course, AMSAT.org has always had a text-based past prediction applet that you can then plunk in your latitude and longitude, or your Maidenhead grid square. Those of you who haven't done VHF, UHF contesting and such, there's a thing called grid squares. The major grid squares are 10 degrees north-south by 20 degrees east and west, but then there are minor grid squares that are 1 by 2, and then there are sub-grid squares below that even. Now, we only use the second level in amateur satellite stuff. So like most of us here are in EM 12, EM the major grid square and 12 the minor. If you want to know about that, go look up on Google search images for grid square map, and you'll see what I'm talking about. There are awards you can earn for collecting grid squares, and there are people that love to go out and rove so that they can give out grid squares to more people. So cool, clouds have come up a little bit, so not as much glare on me. So those are fun things you can do with it. Knowing, again, the text-based thing, you put in your information of what your latitude and longitude, and then you can select your whatever satellite of interest, and then you get a list of the next 10 to 50 passes for that. But there's some cool apps out there. If you have an iPhone or an iPad, my favorite app is GoSat Watch. But there's also one called SatSat that some people use, and that's okay. But I like GoSat Watch. I'll show it to you on my phone here, because it's got some really cool graphics. You can kind of see the the Earth, and you might see the current satellite that I've got selected, and you'll see its footprint, you see its orbital track, but then you can do past predictions, and you can get it to actually, oops, let's find a better one. There we go. You can find an actual sky track and the times up and down, and then it'll give you actual current azimuth and elevation plots for where you where that particular satellite is right now. So it's a very flexible app, has great graphics, a lot of fun. There's also some computer resources, PC or Mac resources out there. AMSAT, of course, promotes a program called SatPC32 because it's it's been around for a long time, but the author from Germany actually has made the proceeds. Basically, he doesn't get any money for it. You pay $45 for the license, and all the money goes to whatever AMSAT organization, either AMSAT Germany or AMSAT UK or AMSAT North America, where you purchased the app through. And I'll be using that in just a little bit here. Oh, let me do this. I'm going to flip cameras. So now you can see my satellite station here. This is an older but very functional FT847 Yaesu radio, and I'm running. I'm looking at GoSat Watch up here because there's a pass coming up here in a few minutes that we're going to be following on FM for a satellite that's called SaudiSat 50 SO50. And this is the SatPC32 program. I'm currently got it set on a satellite called XW2A, which will be coming up a little bit past 11 o'clock. And we're going to try to make some contacts through that. No guarantees, but we'll see what happens. There's also for Linux, if you're a Linux buff, there's a freebie application called gpredict. That's actually it's cross-platform. It's available for Linux, for Windows, and for Mac. So it's a very good program to start playing with this. There's a Mac program called Mac Doppler. There's some older DOS-based programs as well, but you really don't want to go using them. The nice thing about SatPC32 is it can actually control two radios. You can have a transmit radio. So if you don't have a full duplex radio, and I want to talk about the reasons why you want to be able to work full duplex. You're working weak signal mode here, 2 meters up and 70 centimeters down. So it's very easy to have two radios or a transmitter and a receiver that can listen at the same time that it's transmitting. And so that's a good thing. You want to know that you are getting into the satellite. You also want to know that other people, so that you can know that other people, first of all, you need to be able to hear that the satellite's there. Because a lot of people, there are folks that will just kick their transmitter on and go, even if they don't hear anything, because they think, oh, then I'll hear things. Well, no, if you can't hear the satellite, this is a busy enough hobby right now that there's almost always somebody on. So if you can't hear the satellite, that means you might have an antenna problem. You also want to know that you can hear the satellite. You want to know that you can hear yourself, but you also want to know that you're not stepping on someone, because we don't want to interfere with anybody else. You also want to know if you've been stepped on. So full duplex is a really good thing. And one of the documents that I can give you when I with the link is a couple of documents. One's a list of full duplex FM radios, handheld. One's a list of full duplex capable FM mobile rigs, and one's a collection of full duplex capable multi-mode rigs like the 847 or the newer IC 9700. A lot of people are interested in the Yaesu 991A or the IC 705, but neither of those are full duplex radios. But you can use two separate radios to be able to maintain that full duplex concept. So that works out pretty well. You need to know and then there's antennas. I'm using a couple of different things here. Let me go flip the thing back around. For the multi-mode rig here right now, I'm connected to an Alaskan Arrow, which is a 10 elements on 70 centimeters and 4 elements on 2 meters antenna. It's a commercially built antenna, but they work pretty well. I've got a tripod mount. I had a guy do a 3D print shoe for me, and then I use some rack hardware in order to be able to mount the arrow to it so that I could mount it on the tripod. I also, over here, have a more conventional standard arrow antenna that's 7 elements on 70 centimeters and 3 elements on 2 meters. And we're going to use that for SO50 in a couple of minutes here. And another commercial rig is on my hammock over here is my elk, which is a 2 meter and 70 centimeter log periodic. I don't like it as much. I do use it. It's kind of nice because you don't, it can lay flat in your car and such like that, but it's not my favorite antenna. And then there's some homebrew stuff you can do. Kent Britton, many of us know him. His cheap, hold on, I gotta get my thumb off of there. There we go. His cheap Leo antennas, you can build his for like $20, a 2 meter and 70 centimeter antenna with some welding rod or some other stiff metal elements and a wood stick, and you wind a duplexer on a pencil, and off you go. That can work pretty well as an antenna concept. So you got to know, again, what satellites are active. You got to know where they are. You got to know what frequencies they're on. You need to know, and one of the things that I strongly recommend is listening. If you want to get into this, don't just think you're going to get a D72 and an arrow antenna and go out and start transmitting the first day. Although I did the second day, I'll admit that. I bought the book. I read a lot. I read through the Getting Started with the Amateur Satellites book, and I listened for a little while, and then I got a couple days, and then I got on the air. And but do recommend you listening, especially on the FM satellites. They are very crowded, and you can get away with a couple of Bofang radios, and that will work to do it. But I would really recommend listening. Hold on, I'm looking at what exact time it is right now. Yeah, we got a couple of minutes here. Let me get back to GoSat Watch here, because I need that. So, any questions so far before I'm looking for? There it is. That's what I was looking for. Okay. Any questions so far on what I've talked about, or things that you're kind of curious about here?
Could you give us a frequency now to start listening on, just to see what we can do till we get on there and get our info?
No, for listening for SO, if you've got an FM radio, and I'm not sure unless you have a good antenna with preamps on, that you're going to hear SO50. It actually, and here's the thing that people are amazed by. like for instance, SO50 only transmits with 250 milliwatts. Basically, it's a quarter of a watt, and it's 600 miles up. And at the horizon, it's 3,000 miles away. So you're talking fairly weak signal stuff. Okay, 436, 795 is the center, and that's the other thing we got to talk about is Doppler shifts involved. We have if you have if you listen to a train, horn as the horn's coming toward you. It starts off higher in frequency, and as it passes, it goes lower. Same thing happens with radio. We're sitting here on the ground. The satellite's moving at 17,000 miles an hour. So the receive frequency of what's coming toward us
Going to be higher.
Higher starts and gets lower. Now the satellite thinks it's standing still, and we're moving at 17,000 miles an hour. So the interesting thing is, it sees Doppler from us too. So depending upon what mode we're doing and what frequencies we're doing, we also have to compensate for Doppler on the uplink. But it's the opposite direction for us. If we're like for instance with the AMSAT Fox satellites, they uplink on 70 centimeters. There's about a 9.5 kilohertz plus or minus Doppler shift on the Foxes on the uplink because it's 70 centimeters. So we start off about 10 kilohertz low and only get to the exact frequency of the satellite when we're transmitting during the very middle of the pass, and then we continue to go up higher from there. With linear transponders that use SSB and CW, if you're an SSB op, you know that even 100 hertz can make the sound quite a bit different and weird. So we have to be doing, that's where computer control of a rig like the 847 comes in handy, because it can do very precise Doppler shift control of that. So let me get my phone here so I can remember where we are. So 436, 795, I would start probably around 436, 800 as a starter point. Okay, Holly, my wife's going to take over the iPad for a moment. I'm flipping the phone around, and hang in there. So I've got, hopefully you guys can all hear me. Untwist all this stuff because it's kind of named the other here. There we go. SO50 today is coming from kind of coming from the northwest. It's going to be a very high pass. It's actually going to get to about 74 degrees, and it hasn't quite popped over the horizon, but it will in just about a minute or two. It says it's minus 4.6 degrees below the horizon right now, and its azimuth is 329 or 339, which is northwest. So for me, so I'm going to be coming. It's going to be coming from there. It's about a 13-minute pass time between the time these are all low Earth orbiting, so they you get about 4 to 6 usable passes a day from these guys. So this one's going to be coming from northwest to southeast. Keeping track. Oops. Still hasn't come across the horizon yet. Still minus 1.7 degrees below the horizon. Just to let you know, it's about 1,800 miles away from me right now. when it crosses the horizon, it will be about 1,800 miles away from us when it crosses the horizon. It'll be, at max L, it'll be about 500 miles. And it has just now popped over the horizon. I don't expect to hear it for a couple of minutes here. I'm using the Kenwood D72A here, which is probably the preferred full duplex radio for satellite ops, because it can do full duplex. It's fairly sensitive. Now, one of the things here, I've got an external speaker. Of course, with a handheld radio, if you're not using headphones, your microphone is right next to your normal speaker. And so that's going to give you feedback, and it's not really going to work very well. So I've got an external speaker here. So right now it's only about 5 degrees above the horizon. Problem is, having a little connection problem. And the other thing, because again, we talked about the fact that this is really weak signal work, I get attenuation through the trees. So that's not going to help me much. Right now it's about 7 degrees above the horizon, so it's still really over there behind the house. There, I can start to hear the noise changing just a little.
Guys, I want to caution you, if you're not speaking, please mute your mics.
Hey, Tom, instead of holding that by your hand all the time, is there a tripod or something you can use to
Well,
try
if you look, my other antenna is on a tripod. I only have one tripod, so I'm having to. The other antenna is on a tripod. I'm not using that one. I should be hearing this by now. About 15 degrees up above. I'm beginning to hear the quieting a little bit, but because of the trees, that ain't helping me. And again, I don't want to be there we go. There you can start to hear some people there. This is maybe not the best example, but it's what I had. You can kind of hear voices, but I can't hear enough to make a call yet. There we go. No. Helps if you're at high power too. November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa EM12. W5RKN from N5HYP M12. W5RKN N5HYP M12. Yes, N5HYP EM12 to W5RKN. Gotcha. 73's for the Bedford Amateur Radio Club. KB6LTY from N5HYP Delta Mike 94 EM12. Okay, well, worked the compensation so far. SO50 has a lot of interference from station to station. You really hear a lot of cutting out, so, and there's a lot of competition. It's like bad doubling. Kilo 9 Uniform Oscar from N5HYP and Echo Mike 12. Kilo 5 Papa Romeo Whiskey, N5HYP, Echo Mike 12. Kilo 5 Papa Romeo Whiskey, N5HYP, Echo Mike 12. I'm even moving here. There's a lot of fading. Oh, it's straight up. Right now, it's straight overhead. Kilo Golf 4 Alpha Kilo Victor. Kilo Golf 4 Alpha Kilo Victor. I can hear myself now from N5HYP and Echo Mike 12. Go ahead, have a good demo from North Carolina, KC40KD. 73 CU from N5HYP. Whiskey Bravo 4 Zulu from N5HYP. We're at the Lake 12. I'm demoing for the Bedford, Texas Amateur Radio Club. N5HYP. Now, I have been compensating downward in Doppler on the receive. Of course, and that's really what I'm going to get here, I think. I'm now hitting over. Remember, Sierra Fox. I'm going backwards there. Mary 42. Station in EM42 from N5HYP. Anyway, we worked about 5 or 6 stations there. I'm going to kill that for a moment. 2 meters up and 70 centimeters down does tend to have some desense issues, even on good radios like the D72. That's why, for the most part, I couldn't hear myself. But I knew I was getting out just because I've done this before. But when the satellite was pretty well overhead, you could actually hear, you should have been able to kind of hear my voice and maybe hear it go quieting on the speaker over there. And that's because I was able to hear myself and know that that I was getting through. So that's one of the reasons, again, why you want, I'm going to flip the flip the camera back here. There we go. And my wife will be back to hold the iPad while we do the linear pass in a few minutes as well. That'll be a little different. On FM, you know, you don't really have time for long QSOs. Actually, on none of these satellites, We only have one that's two that are relatively high that kind of come out close to 1,000 miles of apogee, A07 and RS44. Those you get about 23 minutes of pass time. Of course, the higher you are, the farther, the more of the Earth's surface the satellite can see, and thus the larger the footprint that the satellite has, and thus the more surface area that can be covered at the same time. The lowest satellite of LEO satellite for amateur radio use right now is the International Space Station, which orbits at about 250 miles up, and so it has a much smaller footprint, and its passes are maybe only 10 minutes long. SO50 is, like I said, about 13, 14 minutes for a pass. It's a little higher, has a pretty good footprint, and so it's a challenge, but it's a lot of fun, and it is weak signal work, but it is a lot of fun. And I've gone to a few odd places. I did take the antenna with me when we went to the coast of Maine, and I made some attempts at working across the Atlantic on the Fox FM satellites. It didn't do very well with that, but I did make some kind of fun contacts from a not so populous grid square. A month or so ago, I went out to the EMO2, EMO3 grid line out in north central Texas here, because I had gotten a request from a guy who needed EMO3 to be able to. He said he was 20 grid squares away from working all 488 grid squares in the contiguous 48, lower 48 of the United States. There are people that have worked close to 2,000 grid squares just on the LEO satellites. So it's that's a pretty cool thing. If you're into chasing awards, that's kind of a cool thing. So let's stop right there. Now that we've kind of gone that route, any questions or comments or things that you wanted to talk about before we do the other aspect of this?
Yeah, Tom, Attila here. John Pugh was really big into a lot of the SAT. He was doing transcontinental communications, I believe. And can you give us some insights to that, perhaps?
Well, unfortunately, like I said, back in the early 80s, there were a couple of satellites that did provide from the early 80s through the early 2000s. We had several satellites that were very high in orbits. A couple like AO10 and RS13 had what were called Molyneux orbits. They had a relatively low perigee, but a fairly high apogee, maybe 30, 40,000 miles. And so thus, even though they were elliptical orbits, they seemed to stay in one place in the sky for multiple hours. And it was very easy to work transcontinental that way. With the demise of AO40 back in 2004, we haven't had a high Earth orbiting satellite that can do transcontinental capabilities. AO7 and what's called RS44, which is a Russian satellite, you can work Western Europe from here. You can work into South America from here. You can probably work Hawaii from here. You could work Alaska from here. The hope always is, but it's expensive. Space is expensive. And even though there's a lot more launch opportunities now, it also takes a lot of money to get there. It's been kind of estimated it would, if we were just to buy a launch, it would be improbable or impractical right now. our AO40 did get we looked for launch opportunities like AO40 was on the maiden voyage of an Ariane, a new Ariane rocket. So it was like, well, if the rocket blows up, it's not going to kill a paid provider like a communication satellite company. But if it works, it's fine. They get a test and they provided some ballast. So 8040 was a good fit for that. AMSAT right now is still waiting on a freebie launch opportunity from NASA called, they have what's called the Educational Launch of Nanosatellites program. And it offers free launch opportunities to Cubesats, but you still have to pay for all the pre-testing stuff, like we call it shake and bake, the flight readiness testing that that any launch provider will ask to make sure that your little satellite's not going to blow up on the way up inside its launch vehicle, and thus dooming all the rest of the hardware that's up there. So, but those are, for the most part, mostly in LEO. We're waiting for the last of the Fox Cubesats. The Fox Cubesats are 1 unit Cubesats, 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters in size. So they basically have a little box like that. SO50, what we were talking through, is probably only a box, only a hexagonal about like that. But it was launched back in 2003 by the Saudis. We don't know what else is on that satellite, but it does have an amateur radio payload. The Europeans did, AMSAT Germany did get a deal worked out with, I think it's Qatar, and they have a hosted amateur radio payload on a geostationary communications satellite that has been very successful over Europe and Western Asia and Africa, but unfortunately, its footprint doesn't reach much beyond the eastern coast of Brazil. So it's not a capable thing for us to use. There was a potential about 4 years ago for a hosted payload for AMSAT on like a FEMA satellite, a government satellite, but I think the whole program kind of fell through. And so at the moment, there aren't any, but AMSAT and other organizations are always looking for an opportunity to get to higher orbit. Long explanation, but does that help?
Yeah. I think in the words of John Pugh, I guess, he got us into this in the area as well. And I think he's done a lot with the schools. And I didn't know if there was virtual school demonstrations coming up that might be on the internet. Are you aware of those?
Keith Pugh?
Yes, Keith. I'm sorry, Keith Pugh.
Keith passed away, and Keith passed away a little while ago. He was an ARIS mentor, amateur radio on the International Space Station, and so he was doing involved with orchestrating schools that got applications submitted for amateur radio and for astronaut contacts on the space station. That's what he was involved with. I've had tangential involvement with that because of a couple of those that we got done for the National Scouting Museum when it existed here in Irving. But and there was recently an ARIS contact at a school out in Rockwall last February, right before the COVID shutdown. And the ARIS program continues, and the ARIS program, along with AMSAT and some of the other organizations and ARRL, were involved with the development of the new interoperable radio system on the ISS. The first component of which got launched and now is in place in the ISS Columbus module, which is a modified Kenwood D710G GA or something like that, and a special power supply, because the power supply needs on the space station are different. Actually, they're different between the Russian segment and the rest of the space station. So they AMSAT helped build a interoperable power supply, and all that stuff took needed flight certification to make sure that the radio or the power supply or any of the components weren't going to blow up the space station. So, and that cost about $170,000 just to do all that. So space is not cheap, even for CubeSats. You know, that's so, you know, if you got a rich uncle, we could use you.
Hey, Tom, I don't know how much time we have left before the next pass, but can you talk about some of the practical uses for having the amateur radio setups on the satellites, aside from just making contacts?
Well, because of low Earth orbiting satellites that only have 4 to 6 passes a day that may last 10 to 20 minutes, they're not horribly useful in emergency communications. I mean, the Indonesian, the Philippines, there was a Philippines university and program that did launched a CubeSat that became known as PO101, and they will periodically say that they were opening their transponder for emergency communications for COVID relief. I don't know quite how that really works, unless, but of course in the Philippines, they have a lot of islands and such. And so maybe that is kind of a way for Philippines hams to be able to communicate. Again, it would really be helpful in the case of one of the things that was proposed with the hosted payload that would have been on the FEMA satellite would have been digital, you know, and there still is a development program for a low-cost Earth station that could be used for data communication. So it would be really nice from an amateur radio standpoint to have a national satellite-based data communications grid. Right now, that doesn't exist. And so, no, I wouldn't really, although there was a scenario back a couple of years ago where one of my friends, Clayton Coleman, who's the current president of AMSAT, W5PFG, was down doing a grid expedition down in Big Bend National Park, and their four-wheeler got stuck, and he was able to make contact during a Fox satellite pass with a guy in Florida who was able to make contact with the park ranger station via phone, and they were able to get rescued and pulled out within 2 hours.
There you go.
So it can happen. So anyway, let me show you where we're at here. I'm going to flip cameras again. So I'm looking at SatPC32. This is the current in kind of flat map fold mode of the XW2A. Let me go to 3D here. There we go. Now you can see that it's out over, you know, the satellite the sub satellite point is still over the pole, but the footprint is beginning to make its way down through Canada. So this is an SSB CW satellite. You won't notice it really right now, but you will, and I'll have Holly aim at the screen a little bit on the radio during the pass. You will note that you will see the software moving the frequency of the radio for Doppler compensation. You start with a set of basic frequencies like there, with the that's the uplink and that's the downlink frequency, and then the radio, the software drives the radio, but I can also tune a little bit on. I can move the uplink frequency in relation to the downlink frequency and such. So I'll use and I'll actually use my CW paddles. Right now it's not on, but I'll use my CW paddles to give me a few bits, and then I can find myself by moving my transmit frequency a little bit to make it line up with my receive frequency. And then I'll use headphones to talk, and I've got a foot switch down on the floor there, so that I can be hands-free a little bit more to work the computer, work the radio. But we're still probably about 3-4 minutes out here. Right now it's footprints just hitting over Lake Superior. This is going to be a kind of a northwest to southwest pass, but it's pretty good, about 30 some odd degrees. The uplink's on 70 centimeters. These linear satellites use what's called a transponder. They listen to a swath of frequencies, in this case only 20 kilohertz wide, in some cases 100 kilohertz wide. In the case of QO100, these geostationary, they have a 500 kilohertz wide passband that the satellite listens to and then retransmits on a different set of frequencies, everything it hears in the passband. It's a shared resource, so if somebody comes in and overdrives the satellite, they basically swamp the power budget on the transponder, and nobody else can hear. So you actually use, on the FM I was using 5 watts there. I'm actually going to use between 5 and 10 watts on single sideband to hit the satellite. You should hear me back. You'll actually probably hear me through the speaker here when I'm talking on the microphone. If I am, that's a good thing. The Fox satellites, like I said, are FM, they're single channel, so they always are outputting about 0.6 of a watt. Linear satellites will basically output up to their power budget. AO7, which was a linear transponder satellite, which was launched in the early 70s, batteries died, it came back to life when the battery died so badly that it no longer drew power down from the solar cells while in sunlight. So the satellite came back to life in sunlight, but it has a very tight power budget. So somebody overdriving the input can actually cause the satellite to fail for the moment, or change modes or whatever. So it's really recommended. To use as little power as possible when working a satellite like AO7. Right now we are two degrees below the horizon. Here we go. So I'm going to be working this radio now. Let me pop on the headsets here.
Just a quick reminder, everyone, mute your mics if you're not speaking.
So right now we're downlinking on 145.678 plus about 3 kilohertz in Doppler. Uplinking center frequency to be at 435.029. So it's really about 435.020, 020 is the or 230 here is 235 actually is the center. So right now we're at 2 degrees above the horizon and just a bit to the northwest. Again, I'm going through some trees here. And so I'll flip my transmit side to CW for the moment. And just wait for a bit. I'm trying to transmit a little. We'll wait a couple more minutes. It's still only 4 degrees above the horizon. There's somebody beeping. Here we go. See if I can find me. Oh, come on, guy. There's me. Hold on. I gotta get back to the right side here. CQ, CQ, CQ. There we go. CQ, CQ. This is November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa. CQ, CQ, CQ. This is November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa. I'm just going to take you a little more this way. CQ, CQ, CQ. This is November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa. CQ, CQ. This is November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa. N5HYP. Not a lot of people on, but we'll see. Hold on. CQ, CQ. This is November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa. N5HYP. Victor L Echo 3, Echo Charlie, Oscar, I believe from N5HYP in Echo Mike 12, doing a demo for a local radio club here on Zoom. Okay, yes, I can, your satellite's weak for me, but I can hear myself and hear you. I missed your grid square. Did you say EN29? Okay, EN29, very good, up there northwest. 73 to you, take care, God bless, and this is N5HYP. I'm gonna move my antenna a bit manually. I'm gonna go more this way. I'm gonna go a little more. Let's try this. This is November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa N5HYP. KB6LTY N5HYP. Hi Christy, how you doing? Yes, I did. Very good. I wish the signal was a little stronger. I would love to talk to you for a minute, but we'll just leave it for that. I got you in the DM14, 73s, Christy, from N5HYP. Right now it's pointing about straight west, about 38 degrees. This is the problem without a rotor. CQ, this is November 5, Hotel Yankee Papa, N5HYP, calling CQ. Calling CQ, calling CQ, calling CQ. This is N5HYP, November 5, Hotel Yankee, tilt down a little bit. N5HYP, November 5, Hotel Yankee Papa, calling CQ. Now the footprint over here is beginning to, there we go. That's okay. Now the satellite is kind of more toward our southwest. But there you kind of saw the point here. One of the deals is the linear satellites, because there's a wider, because of the fact that there is a swath of frequencies, you can have more than one conversation going on. And on RS-44, which has like a 23 or 24 minute pastime, I've had some nice conversations with people. And there actually are some other cool things if you get set up really properly with your time. Of course, with the linear satellites with a single sideband and CW or other modes like that, having very accurate positioning is important, because the software is computing pastimes and Doppler correction from that. Also have to have accurate time in order for that to work out well. You didn't hear any SSB shift because the uplink and the downlink frequencies were both being compensated for automatically by the software here. There's been some experimentation with using FT8, some of the JT modes, FT8 on linear satellites. It takes running very low power so that you don't swamp the transponder. It also takes very accurate frequency control so that the decoding software, the WSJTX engine can properly decode the signals, but it does work. There's some other cool things. There are two transponders that actually do PSK uplink from 10 meters in USB mode to an FM downlink on 435. And that's kind of a cool mode. You actually run a little piece of software called Doppler Psk that actually, instead of correcting the radio's frequency with RSF 232, actually corrects the audio frequency of the PSK carrier, so that the idea there is, because it outputs all, let me flip the camera here. Thank you, Holly. Because it outputs, hold on, there we go. Because it outputs an FM version, everybody sees the PSK passband identically. So you can see terrestrial stations that are drifting along Doppler-wise because of the satellite, versus stations that are Doppler corrected through Doppler Psk. APRS, of course, is another mode that is heavily used by satellite operators, especially from the ISS, when either the Russian module or the Columbus module with the new radio are in APRS mode. There also is NO84, which is another APRS capable satellite. There's a couple more that do have APRS capabilities as well. So that can be used for messaging. You asked about that earlier on. APRS can be used, and the ISS and the other APRS satellites do feed into the international APRS grid. There has been experiments in the past with D-Star on AO27 back in the 90s, but not really anymore, and there's a Chinese satellite that does FM up and what's in digital voice down. It does a transcoder type scenario, which is, yeah, I've never been able to make that work because I'm not a Linux guy, and but there is a build for that, and for the codec 2 decoding of the digital voice downlink. I'm sure there'll be more of that down the road. I'm sure there'll be more data options down the road. So that was that. It was kind of successful today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, what I will do is I will send Jared in a little bit here after I put things away. I will send Jared a Dropbox link that I will give you guys that has a lot more stuff. It has a PowerPoint presentation, which is also available in PDF. It has some documents on good satellite capable radios. It has you know, how to work the Fox satellites. And again, I mentioned the book from AMSAT, Getting Started with Amateur Satellites 2020 version. They release a new one every year. That's a really good good thing to have, just if you like reading. I mean, there is some information in the digital version of the ARRL handbook that gets updated every year. And like I said, ARRL does have a book, but it's but I don't recommend it at all. And I'm always available. Oh, and there are 2 nets in the Metroplex that deal with amateur radio in space. The Arlington Amateur Radio Club repeater 147.14 on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. I'm one of the net controls for that, along with Ray Holt, WA5QGD, and Virginia Smith, NV5F. Are the other net controls for that net at 9 o'clock on Wednesdays. And then the Dallas Amateur Radio Club, the W5FC 146.88 repeater. We have a net on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock, except for the first Tuesday of the month because that's their monthly meeting. It's a great place to find out what's going on in the world, and it's also a nice forum. I always offer time for people to call in and ask questions or tell us what they've been involved with, or find out what they want to learn about in relation to amateur radio in space. So I'm always there, and the email, of course, is n5hyp@arrl.net or n5hyp@amsat.org. That's amsat.org, or TJ Schuessler at verizon.net. There we go. Take your pick.